Alright, so this is the longest I've spent on the Eisenhower. This is the worst traffic. Sayings Gospel of Thomas, right? And we can also add in the Gnostic Gospel of Judas and the Apocryphon of James. These were works that were collected and copied by celibate monastic men. Now, why aren't they in the New Testament? Well, the New Testament is a hodgepodge of various different writings from people of different backgrounds, of different educations, that were all written within the first century, right? And they were widely known from India. I mean, nobody had a full codex of the New Testament until after 367, when Athanasius wrote in his 39th Paschal letter. But Constantine certainly didn't put together any type of New Testament. But there was the Homilegomena and the Antilegomena. The Homilegomena would be like the four accepted Gospels. But some churches would only have, maybe one or two Gospels, maybe an epistle here or there of Paul, and then, maybe 1 John and 1 Peter, and maybe the Apocalypse of John, and, and then another, Carthage would have another group of scriptures, Egypt would have another, Syria, India, Ireland, beyond the Roman Empire up in Germany, and then across the Roman Empire, whether it was in the Eastern Roman Empire or the Western, these things in hiding. So why weren't they ever added into the New Testament? Well, you have Mark, which is very basic, and then you have Matthew, which is a Judaizing version of Mark with the addition of Q, and then you have Luke, which is basically trying to bolster Mark's view of Mark's presentation of Jesus and his view with Q as well, and then you have John. The Sayings Gospel of Thomas is not even parables, like the Good Samaritan or the publican and the Pharisee. They were very obscure things, like the lion eating the man and the man eating the lion. What makes it Gnostic is kind of not understanding what's going on behind that, because you'd have to have a guru or a sect like the Sethians, the Ophites, the Valentinians, the Basilidians to explain this stuff to you. But also because the last line talks about lamenting about Mary Magdalene. Well, I'll have to turn you into a man, and so you can have a soul, so that you can be saved. Because remember, the Gnostics, sex was the worst thing, right? It was a carnal act that was lustful, that tied you to the physical world, and it was enjoyment of the physical, because the Gnostics were Docetists. The physical world was evil to them. And then the consequence could be trapping another soul that's out in the pleroma, in a flesh body, pregnancy, causing another soul to be entombed in flesh. So you have the Secret Gospel of Judas, or Judas, Gnostic Gospel of Judas, the Apocryphon of James, and the Sayings Gospel of Thomas. And Sayings Gospel of Thomas is pretty useless. It's not Q. It's and keep in mind that the New Testament as a codex was not put together until the 5th century. So there was Homilegomena and Antilegomena. The four Gospels were accepted by the 2nd century, almost universally across the known world when Christianity was still being persecuted. From India, which is outside of the reach of the Persians and the Romans, to Ireland, again outside the reach of the Persians and the Romans, and then there was in North Africa, where Libya is, Egypt, Spain, Gaul, Italy, all over Asia Minor, Greece, in the barbarian territories of across the Rhine, where the Romans didn't, had no authority. But the Apocryphon of James, and they say this is what I was pulled aside, and this was what was told to me in secret. So they don't jive with any of the stuff in the New Testament, and everybody kind of knew they were forgeries, kind of like Marcion's version of Luke and Paul, where he just took a scalpel to it because he thought it was too Jewish. And these were docetic, which wasn't popular, because it meant that, only celibate men could be Christians, not women or children, and it required this special knowledge. Now, if you're reading the Sayings Gospel of Thomas today, what does it mean? You don't have a Basilidian elder or anything like that teaching you any of this stuff. And we have fragments of Mary. The funny thing is, the church didn't destroy any of this stuff. This was actually preserved by the church, especially the monks. That's where we get most of our Gnostic stuff from, because the monasteries are where celibate men go to perfect their, and many times they're elitists. They think they're better than other people. I mean, check out the cloud of unknowing that popped up in the West. We don't get really women Gnostics until the Albigensian Crusade, which is like 1,000 years later. That's the thing, is that when people are like, oh, I'm Gnostic, it's like, well, you don't even know how to be Gnostic, and you have no clue what the Sayings Gospel of Thomas says, and not to mention, it's totally hostile to women. But even when they allowed women in, some of the sects, sex, carnal passion, sexual desire, and procreation were damnable. They were satanic. They were from the demiurge. They were the worst thing. Talk about a mortal sin. When with the Catholics, this is like a mortal sin times 20. So yeah, it's shocking when people talk about Gnosticism or the Gnostic Gospels. It's like they haven't read them. They're totally clueless on them. I'll go through Gnostic theology in the next video, because again, Styx, Hex, and Hammer got almost every Gnostic idea wrong. So that'll be the next video. Peace to you.